You're about to view an episode of Sites on EdTech, Zanichelli Venture's interview series with people from the education technologies world. I'm your host, Luigi Morino, and in this episode, I interviewed Shahin Nabavian, CEO of SuperSavvy. SuperSavvy is an adaptive learning platform and education marketplace aiming to make private tutoring widely accessible by drastically cutting its cost. It is also a Zanichelli Venture portfolio company, so we definitely believe in its great potential. Here is the interview. I'm very happy Shahin is joining our Sites on EdTech series today. Thank you for being here today, Shahin.
Thank you for having me, Luigi.
So first of all, let me ask you a little bit to explain a bit what SuperSavvy is.
Sure, yeah. SuperSavvy is a social learning platform that's guided by expert tutors who we call coaches. And primarily the problem we're trying to solve roots in the fact that most children of, let's say, secondary school age study alone after school. Their parents often are quite busy, they can't give them the attention or support, and most also don't have the confidence or the subject knowledge experts. So, you know, what's expected of, let's say, a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old is to know what their learning gaps are, right? You know, to basically look for the right resources or the right communities, and measure their own progress, that what they're doing is going to be is giving them the progress that they need. Also, you know, when you put it together, they have to be super motivated, super focused. And, you know, these are all the things, there's a lot of expectation of a 15 or 16-year-old. So for that reason, I think a lot of parents who want to be involved and support their children look for tutoring. We don't believe that is always the right answer, but it does happen. I mean, the market for tutoring is massive. It's 200 billion globally, and that only represents a small percentage of the population. And I think what we want to do as SuperSavvy is support the unmet, the untapped markets, the majority of the market that don't have access to tutoring. So that's what SuperSavvy, that's the problem we're trying to solve. Later, I can tell you why all the support is needed, okay, but that's really where it starts for us.
I understand, and this is a very clear problem. So many kids actually need extra support outside school, but often, or most of the time, it's quite inaccessible because of the costs. At the same time, parents are often unavailable to help them to the extent that the kids need. I'd like to know a little bit more about the actual features of SuperSavvy, how it works, and what the platform looks like. I think you might have something to show us.
Absolutely. Let me just open this up for you and share the screen.
Introducing SuperSavvy, a social learning platform. Learn from others under the guidance of expert coaches. SuperSavvy has a variety of pathways that cater to all skill levels, supporting and challenging in equal measure. Your time with SuperSavvy is heavily personalized. Your data and our academic coaches create individual programs that truly succeed. We have elite tutors to guide you through an engaging social learning experience. That's me in the middle there. I was a head of maths and a teacher trainer. Our other tutors are ex-teachers or very experienced professional tutors that must pass high-level SuperSavvy quality standards. SuperSavvy uses a powerful combination of AI and human judgment. We've brought the best of the classroom to the virtual space, using tutor judgment to feed our algorithms. Our rich data means you get high-quality progress reports, which we give at regular intervals and which include a video direct from the tutor. SuperSavvy is a social learning platform. You interact with other students and our tech to learn from each other under the watchful eye and guidance of our amazing team of tutors. We even provide the tools you need so you can write straight onto the screen. SuperSavvy provides access to excellent premium resources. These were created by experienced educators for maximum impact, and they're on demand. Exam questions, multiple choice practice questions, exam paper walkthroughs, topic videos, and more. SuperSavvy has a wonderful community, and we have live Q&A sessions every single week. Find us on Discord and engage for free. SuperSavvy is truly flexible and works around you. You can choose to make use of our expert coaches, follow a personalized program designed especially for you, or just be a part of the community. The only question left is, what are you waiting for?
Indeed, what are you waiting for?
Thanks for sharing that, Shahin. So I'm very interested to know how you balance the self-learning path and the tutored part.
Yeah, very good question, Luigi. So we have two types of products. One is a free program for everyone, and that's what we call like a Savvy Start. With the Savvy Starts, you're effectively coming on and getting a weekly kind of set of activities that you need to do on the platform that is designed towards a trajectory. And in the end, we do have to acknowledge that the trajectory for a lot of students is towards a final year exam or some sort of a test, right? So that is self-learning, and we give the answers, walkthroughs, and that live weekly session that they can sit in and observe and ask questions in addition to what they've gained. We do gather data from all of that, everything from their confidence levels, everything from how, we borrowed heavily from the fitness industry, and we love the Freeletics app and how you self-assess and say, well, that was too difficult, or that is, it was easy enough, or it's accurate enough. And that self-assessment, you can't really cheat on it, because if you say, oh, it's easy, you're going to just get harder and harder kind of activities. And if you say it's too difficult, you're never going to progress. So that's self-regulation in combination with the live Q&A plus the community piece gives everyone on the platform a free kind of program and resource and support. We also then have live sessions that they could sit in on. So this is where a coach will sit in with 2 or 3 of you, or maybe 4 of you, and is observing and quizzing and kind of supporting you in kind of making that kind of judgment. And within that cycle, again, they'll have the data of where you're kind of struggling with. And so they'll kind of tailor those sessions, and we will group people who have similar kinds of problems. That's typically how the two work. One final, actually, program that we run is much more of a kind of a course, which starts off almost like at the beginning of the year. You could join at any time, but it is has more of a traditional feel about, you take a subtopic, you look at the recorded lessons, which we've designed in a way that you could ask questions in between to see if people are paying attention and retaining and understanding. And that's your recorded lesson. We do flipped learning methodology. We take the data, and then every week on that same subtopic, you get a live session with, again, a small group. You talk about 4, no more than 4 that will be in that session. Often with schedules, it might be 2 people or 3 people, for example. And in that live session, that's where the coach inputs. And I think you will see from our explainer video, we don't rely on AI purely. AI cannot teach your kids. We can tell you that. I'm a computer scientist. My co-founder is a computer scientist, a CTO. Our computer science, we know AI, and I think what we've injected is a perfect balance where the coaches can give that perspective to the students. We think the human judgment is what helps to kind of re-baseline any assumptions that the students have had, any assumptions in the data about how someone's progress is. And for that reason, we also think that this model is probably much more flexible and much more realistic for the masses versus saying you need a weekly tutor, the same tutor every week for every session, you just carry on. We don't think that's necessary for the majority. If someone is not confident and they're heading towards a certain timeline or target, this is a good time for them to have 2 or 3 sessions, coaching sessions, maybe to boost their confidence, maybe to fill in some learning gaps. And that's where our kind of one-click coaching, you click and attend a class, next week to kind of get that support that you need. That's what we're trying to kind of roll out.
So it's you've structured it in 3 types of products, let's say. Is that correct?
Yeah, at the moment. It's evolving with the market needs. Yeah.
Right. So the basic one is a free product, if I understand. And then the second and the third products are subscription products, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a third one would be for example, a £40 or £50 a month fix, basically, and you get 3-4 sessions, live sessions, and all the content and recording, and all the data tracking. The new product that we're rolling out off the freemium one is more of an on-demand. It's almost like a pay-as-you-go, right? So that model makes it much more flexible for students and their families to say, actually, I'm doing fine, but I may need a booster. And unlike, one-to-one tutoring, you're not going to get a quality tutor to commit to one session with you often, right? 1 or 2 sessions, because by the time you interview them and figure out whether you're a match. So for us, I think that flexibility, let's call it, for the sake of simplicity, more like pay-as-you-go. So freemium, pay-as-you-go, and ongoing subscription on a program.
Can pricing be disclosed already?
It's kind of varying, but let's say for the ongoing course, let's say from the 12 months course, we have a program that's 12 months. The pricing ranges between £40 to £60, and it depends on whether you're going to pay annually or you want to pay and keep it super flexible, in terms of monthly. In terms of the pay-as-you-go, I think at the moment we're looking at prices around £10 for a live class that you sit in as part of your program.
From what I have understood, the SuperSavvy path is at the moment tailored to the GCSE path. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we have created a course as a baseline to illustrate what is in effect unique in the market. At the moment, the market is very much one-to-one tutoring, and they decide what to do with the students, even though, some of the tutoring platforms have created like a digital space where teaching can happen. It's still classic, one-to-one. So what we've done as a first step is develop a maths GCSE course wrapped around the user experience that we've talked about, which is unique to SuperSavvy, and made that all possible to illustrate what will work across the board. We are in the end going to be a platform. We're not going to be content providers nor the tutors, right? What we're going to become is an ecosystem player that allows educators locally in every region, and this is where the independent schools are interested in partnering, is that they develop the curriculum courses locally, and then we will have tutors that are part of that community that are also supporting. So in some ways, if you think about like the fitness companies, like a Peloton experience, right? That's what SuperSavvy in the end wants to do. Is the experience is uniform. The platform that driving that experience is there to be used, but it is actually going to be provided by educators and tutors, and that's what the educator marketplace is.
I understand a great deal of similarity to Coursera and edX in what you are saying.
Correct. Yeah, I think that is the kind of model for the, let's say, the educator parts that are creating the courses. The only thing that we would say is probably if Coursera was being developed right now, it would be developed on an adaptive learning kind of engine. And I think those platforms are quite different because they're classic CMS based. I would say that is kind of an evolution of those MOOCs.
How do you plan to increase your customers' propensity to spend? In particular, since you are thinking about the freemium model, do you believe there is a risk that most of your customers will find sufficient value in your free product and therefore will not become paying customers? Hence, you will have a huge basket of users in the free version, but not a sufficient basket of users in the paid version that will suffice to generate enough revenue for you to, keep providing the free version as well.
Yeah. So we started SuperSavvy because we looked at EdTech, and most of EdTech doesn't make money for this reason. especially if you're just a content play, people for some reason expect content to be free, so you give them free, and they get what they want, and they often walk away. I think we're different because what we're doing is, I just genuinely believe that content is becoming more commoditized. For example, even adaptive learning to a certain extent is becoming commoditized. I think everyone in reality will be able to have that engine. So I think, again, the human element is important in this. And so for us, where people start to kind of get a feel for the product is when, for example, they get sit in on some free live sessions, and they realize that the impact that live session could have for them. And the beauty of our model is that it has enough flexibility with someone to say, even if you're on a middle income or below, let's say you're the last few months are going towards your exams, right? Can you or your parents afford, 20, 30, 50 pounds overall? I think so. I think we're quite lucky in Europe, certainly in even the developed countries like US, etc. That kind of number, 50 or 100 for a few months, is not going to be a huge problem, for example, right? I think what becomes a problem is when you're asking someone to pay that on a weekly basis, and an ongoing, with one person. So I think for that reason, the freemium product should be available to everyone, but we have enough of a hook to support people. And the final part is there are certain features within the app in terms of how we show progress. That's when you slightly upgrade, you'll have more of that view and more of that access, basically.
A very interesting topic you touched upon there is to what extent can we automate tutoring? You mentioned AI alone isn't enough. And this is the model that SuperSavvy is working on, merging the self-personalized learning path together with the tutored path, real human tutoring. So you said that AI alone is not enough. What really makes you believe this and come to this conclusion?
Yeah. I think some of it is just more on a human level, and some of it is on the actual technical level. I think on a human level, we are social animals in the end. And I think having people working with other individuals that they can relate to is hugely motivational. Even if it's not the technical knowledge, it's hugely motivational, right? And for that reason, I think a lot of students, especially in the age groups that we're targeting, motivation and structure and support is as much as important as it is the technical knowledge of, like, I just don't get what this is, for example. So that's one element that AI can't solve, for example. It can maybe excite, and yes, I think you can make more of that emotional side come out, but I think that's one of the key things about being a human. You can connect with someone. The second part is, I think with very few subjects, like maths that we picked, of course, lends itself very nicely to adaptive learning, right? There's rules and structured things like English literature or any literature, any language, for example, maybe more difficult to kind of have an AI only version of it. So I think AI and what adaptive learning is really good for is understanding potentially where learning should start, right? Where teaching, should start. How much does someone know? And where do you need to kind of design a program, or what do you need to surface up? I think from our perspective, on the technical side, I think a lot of classic adaptive learning stuff is still very rule-based, right? And where it might become more interesting is if within the social learning context that you're able to use that all the data that you're starting to gather to, again, either to group people who can learn better together, group them with the right kinds of coaches also, and finally, there is also, the recommendation of maybe now is the right time for you to have that, coaching session. I think, again, we are not a platform that's going to be pushing tutoring, right? We think that a lot of students who come on should be able to in addition to what they're learning at school, be able to go through the program, and with that data-driven approach, a little bit of support from the kind of AI, get through what, customizing what they need. I think where it becomes, important is when someone needs an intervention, that you've already kind of given them the content, you've given them support from their peers, but they need another level. And I think that's where the human element comes in for us.
Right. You mentioned how AI can play its role in maths education and education in general. Now, I'm wondering, do you believe that the main role that AI has to play is through knowledge tracing and through predictive performances of future performances of students through knowledge training of past performance for applications such as the one you just mentioned of predicting what kind of groups of students could function the best together, as well as, of course, personalizing the learning path? Do you believe there are other main roles that AI can play, or do you think these are the main ones?
I guess I'm looking at it very narrowly from the lens of, the venture that we're building, and in context of what is actually possible. And again, if you break down what bits of AI we're talking about, if it's the machine learning elements or, something else, you could absolutely deploy AI. And I foresee, in terms of marking exam papers or coursework, and it's huge potential in automating, or at least having a go at saying, and even we're looking at that in terms of, because we got the whiteboards and the students are writing, and the technology already exists to, if it's legible enough, to turn that digital, right? To say this is what they've written. You've seen lots of apps that probably you write something and it turns it into the digital version. Now, that model then can really be used in terms of kind of the recognition, and then say, okay, well, if that's what the student's written, now let's look at, layer over if someone got it right or wrong. So there's lots of ways that you could improve on, the experience within the digital space. And also from our perspective, for example, we're only scratching the surface. We don't have enough data, but optimizing the live experience with a single expert and making it feel personalized is one of our key USPs, right? And that's what we've built a coaching view that allows someone to really step in. But we already see the possibilities of, even within that session, to deploy a little bit of what we call the SavvyBot, who can remediate low-level questioning that someone might be stuck on, versus waiting and to ask that. Because actually, some of the stuff that we've already built, even with an augmentation of rules and machine learning, can show that people have common ways they may go wrong, and it's easy to detect. They just missed one part of a step, for example. So I think there's lots of potential in using AI and machine learning in particular to optimize even a live experience. So I think there's lots of paths, and these are just a few that we picked out.
Yeah. I totally agree. There are many applications. Some are AI features and tools that are extrinsic to education, that of which the innovations, though, can make big differences in tools that are being utilized in education, and other are direct applications of AI in education, such as knowledge tracing. Definitely. So are you targeting individuals directly, or are you trying to build partnerships with schools?
Our primary kind of go-to-market is with individuals. So we see a huge potential with learners and their parents. We started SuperSavvy with the parent lens, knowing that I think increasingly parents are hands-on, and COVID has just increased that, because so we started SuperSavvy, just when COVID was starting or just before. And what we've seen is more involvement, because everyone's forced to be more involved. And that's also, I think, post-pandemic is going to still be the same. I think people are looking for other options to get involved. So it is direct to market. On the school partnerships, I think we we haven't closed the door, but we've had schools wanting us to take cohorts of students, but that is not our primary go-to-market.
Okay, yeah, I understand. So it's mostly directly to individuals. Can you disclose a little bit about your marketing strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this we live in an interesting time where we've seen great success in the market with the use of social media, especially influencers, for example, to get that first level of kind of traction. And I think once you get to a certain number, it kind of starts to snowball by itself. So I think our approach is very much ground up. We believe in making sure that the products that we're building is sticky enough so that when we go down the route of targeting, for example, we may work with influencers, for example, or directly with hubs that already, or communities that already have students looking for support, basically. I think that our first stage is kind of a very ground up to get to the first 20,000, for example. We do have other kind of midterm, or our flywheel, or it looks more like a squid. But in that model, I think it becomes the demand. Once we get to a certain level, the demand will drive more of our partnerships in different regions, which is primarily with independent schools. There's huge interest with independent schools who want to come on board as education partners because they're finding another route to market. And that's what will get us the coverage of, for example, the content across the regions. And the tutors will then also, where there's demand, there's going to be tutors, basically, right? And so the more tutors that we have, the more sessions, the more pricing can come down for the audience. And that kind of starts to kind of fulfill our wider strategy.
Yeah. You mentioned the UK mostly, but it feels like you're not only looking at the UK. So where else are you looking at, and what are some side plans?
Yeah. So absolutely. I mean, SuperSavvy is obviously is a UK-based company, and UK is a launch market. Presently, we are also exploring opportunities out in the Middle East, the GCC region, and obviously one of the big markets that we have to compete in is the USA. I'll speak about Asia in a moment, but I think the reason the GCC came about is there's a strong relationship with the British curriculum, for example. The market in GCC is different because, for example, the UAE has the highest population of private schools globally. It's not so it's not like Europe or the USA, whereas there's a lot of state schools. And as such, what we're interested in is to understand how a SuperSavvy product works in a market where, everyone goes to a private school and they got tutoring, right? And yet there's still a gap. Right, and so that's for that reason we're experimenting out in the region, in GCC, UAE in particular, and in the US. I think obviously because it is a big market. I think even though there's a lot of competition, just like there is in Europe, we feel that the SuperSavvy proposition will work well there, and we're expecting to do some trials in 2022 in the USA.
Okay. So about the various places you spoke about, especially, let me ask you a little bit about the GCC. What do you feel are different market needs in different regions?
Yeah. I think you look at kind of developed countries like the UK and USA, you would expect that the school system, with the amount of money that is spent, would be enough. But the money that is spent on tutoring, but perhaps also the competition, means that the majority of families who are definitely middle income, I think, are a little bit left out, middle income and below, I would say. And even if you're in the top tax brackets, not everyone is kind of thinking about tutoring. I think they'll do it, or they will support or pay for something when they think there's a problem, or it's the last 3 months towards like an exam. So I think in the UK and the US, you definitely see that pattern. There's a lot of support for students who are on the lowest income brackets in both countries, for example. So that's why for us, what's interesting is the middle market. That's where the majority, we think, are sitting in. Somewhere like the GCC, I think there's a lot of people who, it's less of the local population. The local population isn't huge, so it's more of the communities that are coming in, that maybe they came from the UK, or they came from Singapore, or they're there for 5 years or 4 years. So it's more of a lot of the market or schooling tends to be private, basically. And so the demands in that region becomes very niche in terms of there are certain weaknesses in where none of the schools can cover. There's certain things that we've learned, which I can't tell, that we think might be a great market opportunity. But it is a different, it's not as systematic a problem. For example, let's say, 50% are below pass at maths, for example. I think the schooling system, the public schools or state schools, I think are like anywhere else, but in terms of, if you're just looking at it from a venture perspective, the numbers are not huge enough for us to kind of be able to kind of support at our stage anyway.
There's a lot of talk right now, there's been for several years actually, about teaching to the exam. This seems to be quite widely recognized as an education system failure. And this seems to be quite true worldwide, in fact. I know it is important for you at SuperSavvy to embed a little bit more than just exam nailing into the services that you are offering. How do you plan to do that?
Yeah, very good question. I think even so, in terms of, we definitely, when we set up SuperSavvy, we were looking at saying whose problem are we going to solve? And I think where the discussion points, we fully agree with, there needs to be a far more kind of transformation in the education system, but it's such a big transformation that it's not going to happen in the course of time where the current students and families are kind of in, right? They're kind of, in the next 2-3 years, a lot of our customers or our learners are going to have to take exams. So from our perspective, we realize that those who are going to perform really well in the exams and maybe go off and do the next level and go to good universities, we want to support those students. Equally, what we find, and when we speak to a lot of families, some families are just hoping for a pass, right? They're hoping for a pass because they know that if their kind of families, if their children fail, it has huge consequences in what they can do next. And they're 15, 16-year-olds, right? So you fail your maths GCSE in English, you really can't go to do your A-levels. And so what is your path from that point? So the thing that's in the short term that we're doing is in the summers, we have a future skills program specifically designed. And again, it's using our platform, designed to help students get a feel for the types of paths that they may become interested in, and they could pick up even from now, and they should, because we have these stats about first jobbers, and no one can land a good first job because everyone requires an experience to become a first jobber, right? And so what we expect SuperSavvy in the midterm to be is an equal focus on the ability to kind of sit in on data science courses, programming for the level that students are in, to build up project-based work, so that by the time they finish with their studies, they have a SuperSavvy certificate that can be, something that maybe partner universities that can recognize and say, okay, that person maybe can do a foundation course with us, and then they can move on because we recognize the skills that they have. Or a lot of these students may end up working in startups and other places because they got coding skills, right? They already at 21 have got enough practice than someone who's had a brilliant academic career but doesn't have the practical knowledge, basically. So that's how we see us supporting the learner's journey.
Okay, this is very interesting, and it touches upon an idea that I share with other people in the EdTech world, that it is quite likely that in the long term, a change that EdTech is going to bring about into education is that we will be able to measure students, kids' capabilities in other ways other than exams, and we're going to be able to pass these measurements on to whomever is coming afterwards in more efficient ways than just the marks that were obtained in exams. This is something that was very hard to do before, but with the data mining that we can do through EdTech platforms, potentially like SuperSavvy, then this might really be a future scenario, although education systems worldwide will have to adapt to this and take advantage of these new possibilities. And how long will it take to governments and public systems? That's an unknown. I will not go there.
I was going to say one more thing. I think the other parts that we would always, the reason I said, like, looking at the traditional system versus, an alternative is often also as there's also an alternative that is a real risk where we go, actually, we don't have the structures that schools provide, that everyone can learn anything they want and in any way that they want, right? Which is the alternative way of doing things. I think there's also a risk there because not everyone's wired in the same way. I think lots of people prefer a route, a structure, some sort of path, versus others who struggle in that and need the alternative, basically. So I think education is so broad and covers so much that often, even speaking to kind of big thinkers or even the VCs, for example, who are looking at lots of spaces, everyone seems to think there's one way, right? It's the one winner or the one way of doing it. I just think it's just broad. As humans, we've got so many different preferences that it's likely to have a requirement for lots of alternatives, basically.
Yes. You're touching upon the topic of pedagogic plurality, which resounds for me very, very much. I totally agree with what you just said. The Montessori method is effective for some kids, but it might not be effective for all kids. Waldorf schools might be great for some kids, but not for all kids. Do you believe that this plurality is seen in several platforms being on the market, or do you believe there is going to be a general marketplace that SuperSavvy is hoping to achieve, in this case, where content creators go on to, and therefore a winner wins all for the marketplace itself, for the content ecosystem management platform, and then there is going to be plurality within the creators on the platform?
I still don't think there's a winner takes it all type Amazon model. I could be wrong, given just the scale of what is required, right? And I think what would be where the EdTech platforms will get to is competing on everything that digital competes on in the end. It will be user experience, it'll be customer care, it'll be the community. Those are the things that will drive success for each EdTech platform, and can potentially have enough mass or support where you start to shift, which model works for education for a particular country even, or a particular region. And that's my 2 cents.
So Shahin, you mentioned something called the SavvyBot, which leads me to my next question. are there any additional features of SuperSavvy that you would like to tell us about, including SavvyBot? What is that?
Yeah, SavvyBot is a work in progress. SavvyBot is going to be the assistant across the board with the learner's journey. So it will be your AI kind of buddy. It will be there to support the scheduling of stuff, recommending, what should happen next, but also be supportive when they're actually taking parts in a session. So if they're doing a recorded lesson and they're kind of getting an answer wrong, then maybe hints and tips beyond the video recording. So we're evolving that whole kind of experience. They may also support the learners in live sessions and actually be helpful to the coaches with when someone's struggling, and needs support, etc. So that's what SavvyBot is kind of the learner's assistant.
So Shahin, let me close on a lighter note topic that is likely to bring us all a quite natural smile. I've heard your co-founder, Saqib, has just become a dad. Now I can only imagine how sleep deprived he must be. I mean, running a startup and becoming a father, taking individually are already sufficiently sleep depriving. So the combination must be lethal. Some of the startup work ethic rhetoric out there, I mean, they like Dragon Den or Kevin O'Leary style, have placed strong pressure on founders to always prioritize work above everything else and basically renounce to private life. Now, while founders' dedication to their endeavors is, of course, an essential component that in venture capital we look for when deciding to fund a company, I find promoting this detached workaholic culture to be quite toxic, which has tangibly translated into a lot of burnouts, particularly amongst the youngest startuppers. What is your advice on managing the human side of doing startup? How are you and your team supporting your co-founder Saqib, in this beautiful stage of his life? And what would you recommend to other startuppers when it comes to empathizing with their teammates?
Yeah, very, very good question. So I guess part of it, I mean, Saqib's is got a lot of fire in his belly and got a lot of passion, and so I think he's naturally motivated. So even when we tell him to take time off, we had to spend a long time saying, don't worry, do take time off, that he felt comfortable because he's a maker, an operator all his life. So actually for him, initially it was like, I'll just be a week, I'll be back. And we're like, no, you actually take as much time as you need. Primarily, I think at our stage, we have all kind of created companies before. We know when to switch off and when to keep going. I myself sometimes do work weekends because of the stage we're at, because of all the things that we need to do. At the same time, I know my own limits. I know sometimes it could be a Wednesday afternoon, I'm taking off, for example. So when it came to Saqib, and we are actually at a point where we're about to launch our trials, which it was a bit that he was driving a lot with some of the partners. We were experienced enough to know at what point, how far to take it. He was already organized enough to say, okay, this is what needs to happen. This is, as far as the time that I need to take off. And we could kind of pick up what needs to be done. So, even if it's complete switch off, we literally said, unplug, don't get on Slack, don't kind of get on the phone. And so we just organized, around it. As founders, I think it's important that when you're young, I think everyone, we may have been jostling for more, for positions and, this is my territory and others. I think as you grow, you work in such a transparent way that everyone knows what everyone's doing, And so to that respect, we obviously knew where the due date was, and we just naturally progressed and kind of went when it's along to the point it's starting to take time off. I think so. I think organizing yourselves is the number one thing. Knowing what you need to do is probably important. When you're young, you don't know, so you put your lack of knowledge and experience, you kind of make it up by doing extra hours, right?
Yeah.
Whereas hopefully as you learn and grow, you realize to understand what is really necessary right now. What can I just drop? And I think one of the practices I personally have is sometimes when it gets to Saturday, either on that Saturday I work, or I literally go, I'm going to just drop everything. And if on Sunday, it's still really important. If I've forgotten about all the red flags, then you could wait another day. But if it really is a red flag, then I probably try to kind of resolve it. So I think that's the kind of mentality that we have. Work transparently, know what you need to do, and know where your red line is, right? If you need to take time off in the middle of the week, you need to take time off. Go to the gym, go with the family. And I think that's all is about knowing yourself.
I think this is really great advice, especially for younger startuppers, but also the and not super young startuppers. It's the striking the right balance is so important, and yet quite hard to do. Thanks a lot for joining us today. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I'll definitely be following SuperSavvy, both because it's a Zanichelli Venture portfolio company, but of course, out of personal interest, I look forward to seeing your development.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.